back, and thank you for joining us here for the G. Herbert Stout Student Award presentations for undergraduate students. My name is Stacy Supak. I'm an NC State, and I'm the moderator for this section. And I'm pleased to introduce our third speaker, who turns out to be our second speaker of the day here, Ashley Haynes, who graduated from UNC Asheville with a BS in biology and a concentration in ecology and evolutionary biology. After graduating, she spent a couple years in Alaska doing contracted fieldwork with the National Marine Fisheries. After that, she returned to Asheville full-time and enrolled in AV Tech for the GIS certificate and GIS web certification. Once completing her certifications, she hopes to pursue a master's in natural resource management or a similar field, and we were just talking about the possibility for doing the online master's program at NC State. A little plug for that. And with that, I'll let you start your presentation entitled FOSS and Web Mapping. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Ashley Haynes, and like you said, I'm doing the GIS certificate at AV Tech. I'm here to talk to you today about using open source software and web mapping. So open source, one of the quotes that many times people think of, I'm sure some of you have heard it, is open source is free as in speech. Free as in speech, not as in beer. What that means, of course, who doesn't love free beer? And when you get a free beer, you accept it, you think whoever gave it to you, you drink it, you go on about your business. With open source software, it's a matter of liberty and not just freedom. You have the ability to see how the code works, create it, edit it, and redistribute it as you. So some of the benefits of using open source software, it's lower to no cost as compared to some of the proprietary software that's out there. It can be free or just minimal fees. There's flexibility with the software. It can run on a variety of operating systems. You can use it with Mac, Windows, Linux. This one can be argued, but some say that there can be increased security with using open source. You have a lot of collaborators that are working with the software, so with more eyes on it, there may be some of the vulnerabilities could be found and fixed faster. And of course, collaboration, you're working with others to create the code, you're able to distribute the code. And then some people just want to be a part of something greater than themselves. So I think something that we can do. Of course, with that, there are challenges with using open source software. Usability, you need to learn how to use the software. So that's sometimes with open source, you need to know a little extra coding or programming that you'll have to figure that out for yourself. Documentation availability, it's becoming with everyone online these days, it's a little more documented as it was when it first started, but maybe not as documented as some of your proprietary softwares. And same thing with support. Now you have things like Stack Overflow, and you can find answers to a lot of your questions, but again, it just may not be as easy as calling 1-800 number. And to get your final product, a lot of times when you use open source software, you will have to use a variety of applications. So again, you'll have to learn a few different software programs. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the options for you to use in your GIS applications, your open source software choices. So for database management, PostgreSQL is an option in Suspension Light. Of course, after you've managed your data, you'll need to geoprocess it, and one that most people are familiar with is QGIS, and that's one that I used. GRASS, it's been around for over 30 years. It's really popular. And then the GDAL and Ogre utilities that come with your the geoprocessing software, and I also use that. You can manipulate it. So then you may want to create a tiled base map, and you could, of course, use something like Google Maps and use their map, but you can also create your own. And Mapbox is a good resource for that. TileMill and MapNick. MapNick is a little more challenging. You have to know a little more programming. And then, of course, you'll need to use the web mapping APIs or frameworks to write the program or write the code. And a lot of that is online for you. You don't have to know that. And it's a way to display or you're interacting with it. Some polymaps, open layers, modest maps, and are some of your options. And then once you have your map created and your layers and everything, you'll want to publish it on the web. So you can use some web mapping services, map server, QGIS server, GeoServer, which many are familiar with, and Amazon Web Services, which doesn't really fall into the category of free and open source software, but it is a really useful tool. Odd server, and it's pay as you go, so it doesn't have to be too expensive. So I took a web mapping class, and I wanted to learn how to use all of this software and to create a web map. This is kind of the workflow that I used. Of course, you need to download your data, put it in the right projection and the right size that you needed. I needed Asheville, and a lot of my data came from Logan County. And then I was going to create my base map. Once the map is created, you'll export your tiles, style the thematic layer, and save it in the file format you need, and then write your HTML code to place it on the web, and then eventually display the browser. So, do you have to get your data? I used several of these sites, NC1, Open Data Asheville, and buncombecounty.org, and it comes in a variety of open data formats these days. Shape files, WMS layers, whatever you need. And then I needed to geoprocess my data. I used QGIS and then the GDAL utility. This is really useful as far as the GDAL utility is concerned. You can write a batch file or a script file and cycle through all the layers that you need to be clipped or projected, and it will just do it all at once, so you don't have to do each one individually. And another good thing is once you write your script, then you can always reuse it. And once I clipped and projected my data for how I wanted it, I just loaded it in QGIS just to make sure everything was as expected. And you can see I have the Asheville boundary, the parks layer, the neighborhoods, and the thematic layer that I wanted to use was the managed areas of Asheville. So once I had all my data like I wanted it, I needed to create my base map. I wanted to just create a base map of Asheville, and I included some roads, the parks, and the neighborhoods. So I'm using tile here. And so what you'll do is you'll just load your layers in using the little add layer button. You can then style your map with Carto CSS, which is really similar to, it's structured like web style sheets CSS. And if you're unfamiliar with CSS, then you can use the Carto button, and it has a reference documentation on how to use this style attribute. And this is just a zoomed in of my base map. I have the parks and the roads and neighborhoods. Then once you have your map how you want it, you'll need to export your tiles. You export them and then you unpack them, and it's structured based on zoom, so you'll have as many folders as you have zoom layers. And then when you write your HTML code, you'll point to this folder, so that so some of the coding that's necessary to eventually display your map in the web browser is HTML, JavaScript, CSS, and then using the Open Layer API. So the HTML is what will create your web page, and the JavaScript is how you'll actually add the map to the web page, defining the symbols, and in my case, pointing to my managed layer file, which was a GeoJSON file, and handle the interactivity of the web map. So if you need to click on something to display additional information, then JavaScript handles that. And then the Open Layers API, which you can get the code from their website, it stores all the projections and the map units. Eventually, once you cobble all of those together, you end up with something a little like this. This is my base map with my thematic layer laid on top. You can click or manage area to get more details like I said. And once you do that, it'll change colors. So pink is unclicked, blue is managed by the state. And this is just a zoomed in layer of my map. You can see here, local government is the one I clicked on. Any questions?
Did you find it was easier using, you're a Mac user, right? For the most part?
Yeah.
I know you had some, it took you a while to get it all working, but do you think you'll keep using open source since you like to use a Mac and some of the proprietary products don't run on that?
Yeah, for sure. Once you learn it, once you get the basics out of it, it's really easy. And a lot of the code that you need to know is out there for you. You don't have to come up with it yourself. There's a lot of copy and pasting involved with open source software. And I do love Mac. And the class was kind of taught in a Windows environment, so I had a little bit of difficulty translating some of the script files and things like that to Mac as opposed to Windows.
When it came to all the languages you mentioned that are required for actually putting it on the web, you had JavaScript and HTML and the cascading style sheets. Of all that, did you find that working with one was particularly harder than any of the others?
Well, I've had a couple of HTML classes, so that came a little bit easier to me just because I've been introduced to that before. JavaScript is brand new, so that was definitely a little more challenging. But again, the code was there. The code's there if you know where to look for it.
And then where to plug it in
And
properly.
Where to plug it in. Yeah, you have to, you have to put it where it goes. So.
The same question for kind of the stack from the data management on the bottom to the web output on the top. So part of that stack that was a little problematic, or that you found the open source software to be harder to deal with than the rest of it.
Like I was saying earlier, there's now a lot more support and documentation online. Stack Overflow was my friend when I was going through all this. And so even though there was a learning curve, I was able to ask questions. And creating the tiled map was a little bit challenging.
Right.
Because that was brand new. So I did have to do a little extra research on that.
Are there any other questions for our speaker? All right, well, let's thank her.